Now, photographers love their cameras, right? You love the gear, you love to have different cameras for different uses, and you get all excited when you find an excuse to use one of your random obscure cameras that you happen to have. Well, in Moto, we can actually save our own arsenal of cameras, all different kinds of cameras for different things. And we're going to go ahead and just demonstrate how to do that right here, so you can have different cameras ready for use for different kinds of scenes. So first, let's go over to our items list. Select the default camera in a completely blank scene. I'm going to look at its properties down here. And the focal length by default is 50 millimeters, and I think that's a perfectly fine starting point for most scenes, so I'll leave that. And in the film back area, you're going to see that Moto, by default, uses a film width and height based on a real-world 35 millimeter SLR. That's 36 millimeters by 24 millimeters. Well, that works, and it actually works really well in Moto. In fact, for ultimate, lens photorealism, if you want to really duplicate the real world, this isn't a bad way to go. However, if you were going to export this scene over to, say, After Effects, and you wanted to do perspective matching, well, After Effects cameras, actually, their film back always mimics the aspect ratio of the output. So in our case, we have 16 by 9 output. We're doing 1920 by 1080 output. But our film width and height is more like 4:3. It's a different aspect ratio. That's going to be a problem if we're sending scenes back and forth to After Effects, which I tend to do relatively frequently. So most of the time, I like to set this film back to be 16 to 9. So let's do a little math here, right here in Moto. I'm going to say 36 millimeters for the height times 9 out of 16. Right? For you math heads, we're doing 9/16 of 36 millimeters, and hit enter, and that'll give us 20.25. So now we have a pure 16 by 9 camera with 16 by 9 film. Excellent. Now, if we wanted to, we could set up other stuff about this camera, like adding depth of field, etc. But in this case, I want this to be just a bare bones, simple camera that we can use all the time. So let's rename this 9 by 16, or let's do 16 by 9, simple. And in fact, let's say camera 16 by 9 simple. Because I find including designators that tell you what something is actually really helpful in some cases. Okay, so we have our camera. We're ready to save it. I right-click it and go down to Save Assembly, right? No. We pretty much are never going to use this Save Assembly thing. There's actually a much better way to do this. And that is to head to the shader tree and find the camera there. Right? Cameras and lights are weird in that they show up in both the items list and the shader tree, right? Well, this is an important reason why. Because from the shader tree, I can right-click this and save a preset. A preset is different from an assembly. Whenever you bring in the preset, it's not going to create a new camera. It's just going to apply this to your old camera. So I'm going to save this in a cameras folder that I've already created, and I'll call the file the same thing that I called that camera, camera 16 to 9 simple. Save that. And now I can go in my layout area. I can go to my items list. Now this is just listing my default Moto presets, so I'm going to go to Add Path. And I'm going to drill down and find that path. I happen to have a software assets folder. We'll grab my Moto folder, hit OK. And then inside my Moto folder, I have cameras. And there's that camera. Now watch this. Let's close this up. I'm going to hit Control W to close this scene. Don't save. So we have a completely blank scene. Here's our camera. If I double click on this preset, it's going to instantiate a new camera called camera 16 to 9 simple. And that's fine. But most of the time, I actually just want to replace the current camera, right? So I'm going to undo that. Watch this. Let's grab that current camera in the items list. Just click it once. I'll double click on this preset, and look at that. It renames it camera 16 to 9 simple, and it has changed the film width and height to the appropriate settings. So we can save all kinds of different presets, and if you want to replace a camera in your scene with one of these fancy ones that you've got, then you just select it, double click the one you want to change it to, and it's going to flip it over. Really, really useful.